This is the January 21st meeting of the Estes Park Planning Commission. Call the meeting to order. First agenda item would be to look at the agenda that we have in front of us for approval. Any entertain a movement for approval?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
So we have a second. Okay.
Second.
There you go. All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor signify by saying, well, I guess we vote, sorry.
I'm pushing. I'm pushing.
You're pushing, I mean, what?
I did the same thing.
Pushing the light.
Okay, the agenda is approved. Second item on the, well, I guess the next item on the agenda is any public comment. So any items that are not on the agenda that anybody in the public would want to address. Okay, if you could state your name and address and.
My name is Jed 80. I live at 607 Longs Drive. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I wanted to talk briefly about workforce housing and the new development code. In the current code, workforce housing is defined in such a way as it really means very little. It's not tied to affordability and therefore does not accomplish what presumably was its original purpose. The term is confusing to citizens who understandably believe workforce housing is meant to help the average household obtain housing in Estes Park. In other words, housing that's financially attainable to people like teachers, nurses, hospitality workers, et cetera. Who it actually benefits are developers who use the workforce housing provision to increase density of the housing that can be built on a particular site. A good example of this is the proposal for 860 South St. Vrain, which was recently before you. The developer used the workforce housing provision, proposed putting 10 houses on a site that under the current zoning would only allow 2. The proposed townhouses would likely be sold for $700,000 to $800,000. So is this kind of development the one that was envisioned when the workforce housing section was added to the code? I'm asking that the workforce housing section of the code either be eliminated or tied to affordability when the development code is updated. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, yeah. Please state your name and address.
Thank you. I'm Christine Poppett, 650 Devon Drive. Thank you for listening to me today. I do not expect answers today, as I understand what public comment is after years of speaking during public comment. My thoughts and questions, again, not expecting answers today, are how are items that are so important to citizens discussed at a planning commission meeting at 1:30 in the afternoon when many of the citizens may be working or were not notified? I understand that no actions again will be made today. However, as you are all aware, our mayor and our town trustee Brown have both recently stated that the citizens are at the top of the organizational chart prepared by our town administrator. The staff-initiated ordinance that was recently passed addressed notification. Citizens should be notified of all meetings. I read the public town emails. Right now, I'm specifically questioning the emails between Commissioner Cooper and Director Steve, dated 1/15/25, 4:32 p.m. While I again understand the importance of communications, most citizens do not read the public emails, so how are they to be made aware of the importance of a meeting such as today, even though it may be considered a study session for you all today? Trustee Hazelton frequently expresses the importance of citizens attending meetings early on with regards to many items, such as the town's strategic planning, the town's budget, to only name 2. I personally attend every meeting that I can, however, not everyone else can. And how would citizens who do not attend meetings and follow the town's email be made aware of today's meeting? Just today in the town's elected officials' email, a citizen commented on an issue, and this is a separate issue, however, this is public, so I'm not sharing anything that cannot be read by the public. In quotes, the public and especially owners were not only not given advance notice, nor the opportunity for input, but it seems that this decision was slid, in quotes, in by the board. That is blatant abuse of power. We are not only disappointed in the board and are extremely concerned of the direction that Estes Park is heading, but it is just plain disgusting, end quote. And again, that is public. That is not my quote. I'd like to finish by saying that I would like to dedicate my time to the Estes Park Development Code rewrite process, and I believe that citizens need to be involved and allowed a say. Reminder, who's at the top of the organizational chart, prepared by the town administrator. Staff-initiated ordinances, such as the two that recently passed, are not fair to the citizens if they are not notified, just as spot zoning, which is on the agenda today and is illegal in Colorado, is to the benefit of one party. Property and zoning rights exist for a reason. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll move into our discussion item about rezoning.
We need to vote on the consent agenda.
I'm sorry.
Which is the
Consent
minutes.
agenda includes
the
and
minutes from the
is the
last
minutes from
meeting.
line. I believe I was listed as being in attendance and I was not. So that was one note.
You're shown as absent.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, my mistake. Okay, entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Oh. I motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor, we'll vote. Okay, very well. Now, let's go on to our next item, discussion item about rezoning. Community Director,
Correccia.
Correccia.
I've heard other pronunciations.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commission members. Pleased to bring this item before you. This item, more of a study session type item. After the last meeting, several members were looking for guidance on what were the rezone criteria, what did the development code say. So it seemed appropriate that given that there was an interest from a majority of the commission, that we could bring this study session item before you. And we're hoping that it's informal, Chair Cooper, that we could run questions through you, but between the staff here, we have the full planning staff, we have the town attorney here, that there's a lot of experience here that maybe that we can share with you, but hopefully we're hoping to just get questions and maybe clarifications. There is no formal presentation. I do have just a few slides that I can run through back and forth if we need reference or resource material, but there is no staff presentation, formal PowerPoint. And again, as kind of a pseudo study session item, there was no action requested from the commission today. It is just discussion, questions, answers that we can share information back and forth. With that, the Chair Cooper, I have some slides that has the zoning criteria, some information on the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance, the future land use map, a zoning map, something that maybe we can go through. And I'll just show those real quick if any of the commission members want to see a particular slide. But these are the criteria. Real quick diagram here, just kind of showing where we go down from community vision, comp plan, master plans, just kind of showing what we look at. comp plan versus development code, some criteria, and I'm going through these fast because I figure we'll go back and forth. Our future land use map versus our zoning map. So these are some of the slides that we have here before you that we can go back and forth as we go through our discussion. And I'll just start with, these are the three criteria. These are what the commission members asked us to look at. So with that, Chair Cooper, we can open it up to you and the rest of the commission members for questions.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So there are three requirements for rezone, three basic requirements that the planners put before us, and it has to meet all three criteria. It can't meet two of the three, it can't meet one of the three, all three criteria have to meet. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, commission members, and how this will work, I'm just the one at the podium, but we have all these resources here, so we'll probably.
That's fine, I put it out to the
Yes,
whole
so-
staff, so.
So, how, from what we look at this, we have some of the same questions you have. One of those is how specific are these criteria? And we look at them, they are very general. Code does not give us guidance to say 50% for number one, 25% for number two, right?
But that's not my question. My
Right.
question is, the planning commission has to, each of us evaluate against these three criteria. And we decide whether they've been met or they've not been met. But all three of them, in the mind of the commission, each member of the commission needs to be satisfied.
Vice Chair Arterburn, yes, that's correct. That's the difference. In legal speak, that's the difference between criteria and factors. These are not factors, these are criteria. Each is critical to reach the result. So all three need to be met in this instance for rezonings in order for a proposal to be approved. The same is true for other criteria for other kinds of applications.
Okay? So in criteria one of the things that keeps coming before the planning commission is workforce housing. And that the need for housing is what is being, we build any kind of density in that satisfies that first criteria. But there is no benchmark for what that means. We spent a lot of time in the previous meeting talking about that. But again, there's no criteria. Just had a public comment today about no economic criteria around that. So in my estimation, when the staff brings that to us, if that's going to be a criteria or a justification for satisfying that criteria, it has to go deeper than just the fact that there's a workforce housing need. It has to do an economic comparison. It's got to provide more meat on the bone. Otherwise, I don't know how we justify that it meets that criteria for a changing condition in that neighborhood. So, because otherwise it's just, you might as well take that one item and say, all of Estes Park is satisfied because we have a workforce housing need. Any density. We're going to build new houses, so automatically meets the workforce housing need. That to me, that's not specific enough. It's not a reasonable argument to be made by the staff because that's not really in the interest of. Wasn't in the interest of, in my opinion, it wasn't in the interest of the last consideration. That's why I voted against it. But we don't have clear guidelines around that. So either we need some guidance from the town as to what those criteria are. So I'll give you an example. The argument was made during that meeting last time that said, well, we need housing for lawyers and doctors. Okay, so I did a search on lawyers and doctors' salaries, average salaries in this town. And oh, by the way, we just had Vern Carter speak at one of our recent thing I was at this week, and they're hiring 2 doctors. So it's not like we have thousands of doctors that are being hired for Estes Park or thousands of lawyers are coming up here. So with that said, that average salary, they can meet that criteria for what we looked at a few months ago, but you can't, there's no median salary that comes close to justifying the build of that density housing and giving that density enhancement to them. So In our minds, if there is an economic argument that's being made, and there needs to be more refinement around economic factors that say this building meets this economic factor, even if you compare it to the other high-density places that are in that neighborhood, how does this one compare to those? And because otherwise we have nothing, no criteria to go by to satisfy the first criteria of the three. So I think that's one area where I would like to see what the staff is going to present in the future for that, because it's wanting. I mean, you hear public comment and other about this same issue. So I just think this is an area where I'm completely confused as to why we can just blanket see this criteria is meet because we have a workforce housing need in Estes Park. Would you like to comment on that?
I would.
Okay.
I think the term affordability is really misleading in some cases. If you look at affordability housing, you're really looking at some more specific criteria, as far as I understand it, from the Housing Commission and some governmental assistance potentially. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, Chair Cooper, maybe this helps. Scott Moulton spoke recently, and what he said was helpful for me. There's affordable, attainable, and workforce, and they're all different. Affordable goes back to federal guidelines for how much of your income you spend toward housing. Attainable has to do with, in our code, no more than 40% of the income of someone making 150% of the area median income. That's what would go toward their housing costs. So a specific definition. And workforce means you work full-time, and there are definitions for that within the valley, within the school district boundaries.
I would almost, when I was listening online to this conversation last time, what came into my mind was these are more available units. Thinking from that perspective is that we don't have, just hear me out, that we are putting in more available units for somebody to be able to attain. Now, I think it's really disingenuous to say that my daughter, as an example, just graduated from college a few years ago, and her starting salary is pretty clear if you want to look online to see what it is. You don't know that her grandfather gave her some money when he passed away. You don't know that. She has attainable, so she's able to attain something that just judging it by saying a nurse or a physician or a janitor or whoever makes this much money, therefore nothing's attainable. So I think that's really disingenuous to be able to say, I like that availability option to say, now we have a few more units available. And I think one of the things that I looked at back when we had a discussion about the property where we were trying to go from E1 to E to get a few more units aboard, one of the trustees made the comment that this isn't going to do enough to help. In other words, they're saying you're only going to get one more unit. You're going to squeeze one more unit out of 1.7 acres, and that's not enough, I think was the comment that the way I took it away. So I like that term about these are now more available for somebody to be able to move into.
So my argument isn't around availability, affordability, any of that crap. It is about, excuse my language, it is about the idea that we're going to rezone this property, and we're going to meet the criteria that says there's a change in this area that substantiates the need. Tell me what the change in that area that warrants the change in the rezoning to put a high-density unit right next to what is previously zoned as state to all of a sudden cram it in there. The answer comes back, workforce housing, workforce housing. So no, you can't, the argument is what is the reason you had a change in that area that warrants this to be built? And that, all those arguments, I'm not arguing a single one of those definitions. I'm arguing no argument was made by the staff as to why in this area, that increase in density in that rezoning would be a reasonable reason to build that on that small acreage. It's got to be a more plausible argument that's appropriate for the area. So, and I heard the argument that said, well, there's already a bunch of units in there, right just down the street. That's not a change in the area. That's not saying all of a sudden we got all these people moving in. And oh, by the way, in that price range that these were going to be built, there's 52 units available in Estes Park right now that have been out there for more than 5 months. So how can you argue that there's a reasonable change in that area? You can't. So, but these are the discussions I think the Planning Commission needs to entertain, rather than having blanket discussions and just saying, hey, we have a housing need. It's economic, it's location, it's all those things combined in, and I felt like the staff justification was wanting in making an argument that's credible to the area for the affected change. So now I have a better understand. We got wrapped around all the definitions and everything, and the builder wanted to come up and say, no, I'm not building affordable housing. Got all that. No, duly noted. We noted all the definitions. That has nothing to do with the affected area and why that area has a need for change. That's the criteria. So let's be very specific about what the criteria is and answer the mail and have those discussions at that level, at a deeper level than just the workforce housing ordinance. That's my comment. And if I'm off base, tell me.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Arterburn, I'm following you, and I appreciate Town Attorney Kramer answering before. I tend to be long-winded, and so I may not sound like I'm answering your question, but to address that specific concern, and especially with that specific case, but I won't talk about that specific case, we wrote that in the staff report. Couple things. Each of you 5 will look at these rezoning criteria differently. That's fine. Commissioner Arterburn, you may have a different perspective than Chair Cooper. That's fine. That's why we like all 5 of you. You bring different perspectives, opinions to the board. You may look at one a lot more specific than I do. I thought Senior Planner Hornbeck's analysis of that last case, laying out the change of conditions, was very detailed. We take a comprehensive view of number 1. Number 1 can be looked at, nothing's changed in this physical area. The properties are all the same. They've been this way for 30 years. Why should I support a rezoning? There's been no change in the area. As I wrote in a staff report, staff takes a comprehensive view. Change in conditions in the area affected. The number 1 change that has happened most recently is the comprehensive plan, 2022. That comprehensive plan has housing criteria that asks us to look at new housing opportunities. Those are goals and policies within the plan. That plan affects that property. It affects all properties in town. That's what we look at when we look at a rezoning. So we're going to take that view. That could be different from all 5 of you. That's fine. But that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the comp plan. That's a change in conditions. We're looking at changes maybe 10 years ago. What's happened to this property in question last decade, 2 decades? What has changed? Did a road go through? So we're taking a long-term view. We're taking a physical view, what's happened in the area. We're looking at plans and master plans, open space plans, transportations plans, what's happening. So that's our take on it. And Commissioner Arterburn, yes, that could be different if someone was looking at just narrow the land itself, and neither one of our opinions maybe is more important than the other. I just wanted to provide the context of where your staff is coming from when we provide you our professional opinion.
Point of clarification too, when you bring a proposal like that to us, it's gone through you, it's gone through your planners, and it's gone through Attorney Kramer, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So everybody's basically said yes or no, and if it's a no, then it's not going to get here. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, it could get to you, but potentially maybe we felt it did not meet the criteria, so we might bring you a denial.
A denial, yeah, a request for denial.
Correct.
Chair Cooper, I just want to make clear, I'm not part of the decision whether to recommend one way or another. I advise staff either way. They're the planning professionals. I try to help keep everything moving with the proper process.
But you will review it, and if it doesn't meet some legal requirements from your perspective, you would comment on that.
I actually don't review all staff reports that come to you all. If there's a particular question or if there's something that requires a little bit more attention than I do. But a lot of the time, it's planning staff communicating directly with you all on applications.
I have a good question. It seems like there's been a report that was done to indicate what the future use of, what we needed in workforce housing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Housing needs study?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And isn't that something we would use in criteria to make a decision?
Mr. Chair, Commission members, yes, that's what we would look at in terms of, the comprehensive plan. That's kind of like the master document, especially for planners. That's what we look at for guidance. I think where you're looking at now is master plans, policies, and studies. Transportation plan, open space plans, housing studies, an annexation policy. Those then fall under what we look at, the comprehensive plan.
Do you have any indication what that number was? Because it seems like it was in the thousands of what,
1,500 or,
yeah.
at the time it was around, when the study was done, I remember like around 1,500, and I've heard people throw numbers out there that it's more. And, I just want to say more to like what Dave was talking about. And I like what you said that, that really it's really a matter of how we see it and interpret it, individually. But, for myself, I came here 25 years ago, and workforce housing, affordable housing, however you want to say it, all of those things were an issue 25 years ago, and it's really become an issue now. We have an aging population. I think I read that the average age in Estes Park is well into the 60s now. So, the need to bring affordable housing for younger people here really is a need. And for me, it's, really meets that, the first criteria. And it really is something that we need. I think that, the comprehensive plan was written with that in mind. And it says that we need that, we need more housing. And so that's all I have to say about that. It doesn't have to be, it's been justified more and more, or it's been justified time and time again that everybody looks and says, we need to bring more, younger people here. Estes Park is literally and figuratively dying because the average age here keeps getting older and older, and we don't have, and the reason for that is because younger people can't afford to live here.
So just a couple of comments. One is, first of all, Jeff, your point is that you used the term affordable housing. I agree, we need more affordable housing. What we considered last month was not in the affordable housing range. So second is, the second comment I have, Steve, for you is on affected areas. that's the part that I'm dwelling in on there. So in what your explanation was, affected areas says, because we have a comp plan for Estes Park, then that comp plan, the affected area is all of Estes Park, and it applies to everywhere regardless of any individual condition. So if we can build density on any open property, then that's what the comp plan says we should do. Am I understanding you correctly? That criteria is automatically met because there's a comp plan need to build.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Arterburn, and I'm going to ask others to join in. It's always good to hear something, a different perspective, but just my perspective. Yes, we had a new comprehensive plan adopted. That comprehensive plan affects every property in town limits. Depending on each case, each rezoning case is different. There's going to be criteria, and they're complex. There could be policies in this plan that affect one property that maybe don't transfer to another property. When we're looking at opportunities for housing, the plan does have goals and objectives that talk about housing, workforce housing, attainable housing, affordable housing. Are there opportunities to promote that? And in those instances where we can, this plan is appropriate and your staff feels can be applied. And again, that's just our recommendation to you. You may have a different opinion. The Board of Trustees may have a different opinion. Again, we appreciate your service, the different opinions you bring. We want good discussion. So we're not telling you this is the way it is. You can come to your own conclusions. So that's just how we view this plan. As planners, and again, this is probably a bias on planners, this plan is what guides us. So this is our important document. Each of you 5 in your careers, you probably had a document that guided you. This is ours. And I would open it up to others.
I'd like to add something to what Director Crutchy is saying. So it's not just the goals and objectives we look at the future land use map. So the comp plan does say we need to look for opportunities for housing, but we wouldn't feel like that would be appropriate everywhere. We'd look at the future land use map and we would see how that is, it's not zoning, I mean, it's land use, so we would see where it's appropriate for that. And since that's a guiding document, not regulatory, that's why we'd bring it to you all to decide, is it appropriate to rezone this property so that can match the land use that's in the future land use map in the comp plan? If we could go over to that map. So, for instance, you see a lot of this lime green color, that's all suburban in the state. So I believe the definition of that is all the way down to quarter-acre lot. And so if we see an application that's proposing a rezoning to lot sizes that small, we would look at this future land use map to see if it's compatible with the comp plan. It wouldn't be appropriate everywhere, but in theory, it could be appropriate where you see that lime green color.
Just as a comment on that also, having served for 18, almost 24 months on the Comp Plan Commission, there were several opportunities to review the future land use map in several public venues. So I think it was, I'm not going to say perfectly vetted, but at least there was a lot of opportunity for input on that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, one thing I would add to this, I was going to bring it up, so thank you, Kara. A key consideration in looking at this map is how it's changed from the 1996 comprehensive plan. So for some past cases before you, we compare the maps, and this was changed in 2022 for a number of properties. So that is a change in conditions very clearly in our mind, that it's got a different designation, different density proposed. So that's a very important factor in our minds.
Question. The issue of spot zoning pops up occasionally. When the comprehensive plan in the past St. Vrain discussion last meeting, the comprehensive plan aspirationally said, we think this should be used a little bit differently going forward. If it hadn't been that way, could that have been considered spot zoning? I'm sorry. Yeah, could that have been considered spot zoning and may have been inappropriate?
So, Chair Cooper, maybe I can help with this one. Spot zoning is a term that popped up in a number of cases. It's not as common a holding anymore for a court to strike down a rezoning due to spot zoning because it's become so commonplace to have specific criteria for rezoning like we have. So in general, spot zoning is when a rezoning is done in order to allow for development that wouldn't otherwise have been allowed in a small area amongst a larger, differently zoned area, without regard to changes in conditions in the area affected, and without regard to a comprehensive plan for how this is done. So I would say that the absence of a new land use map doesn't necessarily mean that something would have been spot zoning. And you were more involved in the creation of this map than I was, but the idea behind creating a map like this is that it's the opposite of spot zoning. You're taking a comprehensive view, creating a comprehensive plan for how the entire town should see its land uses move, and then zoning flows from that. That's really an attempt to avoid something like spot zoning.
Other comments, questions?
Can you give me the definition of mixed-use centers and quarters? What's that's defined as in terms of zonings?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I don't believe there is a definition in the development code for that, largely because the development code predates the comprehensive plan. That's a term used in the comprehensive plan. We can bring up the comprehensive plan language on what that vision entails.
I believe, Community Director, that we have a bid out for someone to help us to develop a new developmental code. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Would it be your vision that we try to be a little bit more specific in some of these areas? I know you made the comment that, referring back to the changes in conditions, again, whether it's really local changing condition or a little bit more of a global changing condition, it's a little bit nebulous. Would you envision trying to be a little bit more specific in the new developmental code to help correct some of that? And I believe when I referenced, and I just, for purposes of everybody in the room, handed out minutes from 2023 Planning Commission where we approved zoning change in one parcel from E1 to E for 1.78 acres. And then that went to the trustees and they unanimously turned that down. And a couple of the comments in there were it didn't meet, they didn't think they met the conditions of change. And there were other comments that were referencing that it didn't do enough to meet change needs. So it's kind of a little bit all over the place. So a little bit more clarity might be helpful. And I think referencing the public comment earlier that if there is an opportunity for public input on that plan, I think it would be welcome by all of us in the community.
Okay, Mr. Chair, that sounded like a two-part question. I'll start and others can jump in, please. I've worked for a few different communities, and the criteria for rezoning are similar to what we have now in terms of I usually see any type of map amendment shall be consistent with your comp plan. It shall also be considered compatible with the surrounding area. That's the two most common criteria I see, which we do kind of incorporate here a little bit different, but those are the two main criteria that I see. Again, not very specific in terms of guidance. It does leave some items open to interpretation where 5 of you may, yes, I do see that compatible, maybe I do not. So there are open type of criteria. The development code, we will, Mr. Chair, that is something we will look at, make sure we're consistent, other communities here in Colorado, that our criteria here from 2000 basically, is this still appropriate? Is this how other municipalities are reviewing rezonings in Colorado? The question number 2, before I jump in here for others, we do plan to have a public engagement plan created. That's one of the reasons we picked the consultant that we did. They were very good at getting public involvement. I should state, just for clarification, there'll be a little bit of difference from your participation on a comp plan creation versus development code. Comprehensive plan, very community driven, right? That's our guidance document. That's vision, aspirations. What do we want Estes Park to be? Development code does get into the weeds. That is more technical document. There will be public involvement, yes, but not so much as the public driving the document. Technical codes will be more important with this code. But other than that, I'll open it up to others.
Chair Cooper, for me, I think your question gets to the heart of the matter. Criterion number 1 is very broadly written, right? And leaves room for different interpretations. So a fair question is, could it be written differently? Should it be written differently? That's something that could come up either as part of the development code update or outside the development code. There's no reason it has to be written just like that. I don't know what the thinking was behind wording it that way in the first place or how long it's been part of our code that way, but not all communities have it written quite like that. There's, as Director Korechi has said, there are some common themes in criteria for rezoning: consistency with the comprehensive plan, compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. But here's a criterion that I see in another community: the rezoning is consistent with events, trends, or facts occurring after the adoption of the original zoning that have changed. So it could be written in such a way that it doesn't have to be that changes have spurred the need for rezoning. It could be written to say that changes have happened and this rezoning is going to be consistent with those changes. So it could be a subtle difference, but those kinds of questions are within the purview of the Planning Commission to think about. I know we have this development code rewrite coming up, and that's a good opportunity to have the conversation.
During the discussion, and I wasn't able to attend the meeting when we discussed 860 South St. Verlaine, but I did listen in on it, and I did note that there was a lot of discussion about animal movement and the animal corridors. And I guess I don't completely understand what an animal corridor is, or if we should consider that when we are considering kind of a change in a rezoning. I'm just curious. I know, Chris, you've talked a lot about needing to update those animal corridors, but you might need to help me understand a little bit more exactly what those are and how does that factor in potentially to a homeowner or a landowner that may want to do something differently with their property.
I guess the habitat corridor map that I've been referencing is, geez, I forgot, maybe from 1996. It's a really grainy map with some red arrows that shows the migration patterns of the deer and the elk in the communities. However, along with all this, decision-making criteria that we have here, we have to see what the ultimate impact of the surrounding community is. One of the key factors of people coming to Estes Park is to see the wildlife. And, it really needs to be updated. There's been a lot of changes, I imagine, in a quarter century. And, you know, for where I live specifically, I can tell you how many elk come through on a weekly basis because the cameras pick them up. However, for that individual opportunity, I thought that I didn't think it was well balanced, and I did think it would have a significant impact for the surrounding property owners and the entire community at large because, you know, everyone has stopped there multiple times a year, unfortunately. But, you know, I mean, just looking at the suburban estate on the comp plan, you know, it says proximity to sensitive environment features or wildlife areas. I mean, that's a guiding factor on some of the decision-making we have to take into consideration when we're looking at these things. And I think, it's my personal opinion, that we need to take a really hard look at that. Developers should be taking a hard look at that because that's what, you know, the community makes it so special, and that's what we care about a lot. So that's the wildlife piece. Obviously, you know, there's a slew of other things that we need to take in consideration, but to Commissioner Afterburn's comment, you know, last year I think it came up, there was some back and forth with the Planning Commission on the attainable, affordable, and workforce, right? It seems like that's been a blanket statement on the changes and conditions, and I know the comp plan is our guiding light, essentially, to make some decisions here. I think it would be helpful for me, might be for others, to have a little synopsis on the definition there, because the 125 AMI, I mean, unless we're really diving in deep, we really don't know what that means, and the benefit to the community if they state such a thing. If it's affordable, okay, what does that really mean, you know, to the layman? And, you know, if it's workforce, is it 5 houses? And just to put some clarity on the housing assessment needs, housing needs assessment from 2022, 2023, they state in their report there's 2,700 housing that's needed in Estes Valley. So I questioned that at the time. However, you know, they do have some more clear-cut goals of like 550 by 2030 of workforce. So I think that the developers, when they bring that in and the report, if it could touch on some of those key points, it might help us out. The other thing I'm just going to say openly, a lot of the rezoning requests that we've seen, and it's the property owner's right to do what they want with their property, it's the zoning that keeps them within those guardrails, is we've seen it go from one, like the E1 to the extreme of RM, right? There's really been no tear down. And I look at the map all the time, and I think that that would be helpful to anyone that's bringing stuff ahead of the Planning Commission and the trustees, is looking how we accommodate some of these goals, but tier it in a way that makes sense. You can't, I don't think you can go from E1 to RM like that and then E1 on the other side without a really good explanation on the changes of conditions. But then, again, the things that have come in front of us are attainable, affordable, or workforce. So that's just my open comment. And I think that would be helpful to just touch on some of the definitions if they do bring them forward.
You had a question on mixed use. What is the definition? And it, on page, of course, I don't know if 78 is actually the page, but and it's on page 78 in my readout.
I see it, it's right.
Okay, yeah, so that does give a definition somewhat. Do you feel like
And that place we considered doesn't meet that definition. No, the one we considered last night did not meet that definition. So it's not upper story residential, office, institutional, commercial, entertainment, medium high density such as hotels, motels, short-term rental, attachment units. That does not describe the property we were considering last month. So I'm just saying is we have to be I'm sorry. Turn yours on. As a planning commission, we need to dig deeper about those definitions and doesn't meet that. There we go. Now it's on. Yeah, it doesn't meet, we need to dig deeper, and it doesn't meet that definition. That was what was in the justification. The comprehensive plan says that's a mixed-use center and corridor, but that wasn't the property we were considering. So I'm just saying, I'm just asking that, I got your clarity as to, if we're going to use the comprehensive plan, then we need to be more clear on the definitions, more clear on exactly what we're approving and what is being presented to us. And then we need to consider it in a brain that says, is this that affected area? We need to treat affected area, in my opinion, more carefully than just a blanket comprehensive plan. We have a need for housing, blanket statement, and let's move on. That's my comment to the commission.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Arterburn, just a clarification again for context where the staff is coming from. This mixed-use centers and corridors, yes, that property is right now, it's got a small house on it. It's not a mixed-use center and corridor piece. This plan, though, from what we're looking at, is aspirational. It's looking 10 to 20 years down the road. Could 7 be one day in 20 years mixed use? Yes, and according to this plan, that would be the intent. So you're right, today, snapshot, that property is, no one would say that that's a mixed-use parcel. But looking 10, 20 years down the road, could it be when someone looks at it in 20 years? Yes, this could have 7 through town, could be considered a mixed-use corridor.
I think Planner Hornbeck did a nice job, from my observation, of laying out all the properties within about maybe a quarter of a
Yes,
mile,
sir,
maybe
yes.
even a little bit longer. And in my opinion, if we're just looking at one little parcel of land versus maybe a half an acre to maybe 5 acres down the road or whatever, again, that's one of those discussions that, how tight do we make that discussion versus broadening it out a little bit. Anyway, I thought Planner Hornbeck did a nice job of laying out all the different housing options that were in that kind of maybe half-mile corridor up and down St. Vrain.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree with that. It was laid out well. It showed what they are, but it's not, but the area that's south of that property meets is in the comprehensive plan. It's not mixed-use corridors. It's mixed residential. And it meets the definition of mixed residential. Across the way where this property was, it's mixed-use corridors. So it doesn't meet that definition. So, and I'm looking at what was presented, and in fact, it's not consistent in my mind with the comprehensive plan. And it says right here, mixed-use corridors. This is from what we reviewed. And this property is in mixed-use corridors. This is mixed residential. So everything south of that, all those Prospector apartments, everything else is in a different portion of the comp plan. All I'm saying is we as the commission got to be more careful about reading that comp plan, not just taking what gets presented before us, and be more mindful of the definitions that we're doing so we can be consistent in the future. That's my point. We shouldn't be approving things because, hey, everything around it looks and smells like that. That's not the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan says we have a plan for this in the future to do these things. So it should be consistent with that use plan on the land use map, everywhere else. And I just think we as the commission got to be a little more careful about looking at those things and being more diligent about saying it's consistent with the plan, comprehensive plan, not just because it gets presented in a certain way. Because I agree. I'll be the first one to agree. You drive up that road, they all look the same. They all look like the apartment buildings. They all look like, a high density neighborhood, but that's not what the comprehensive plan, if we're saying we're going to do the comprehensive plan and we're going to build in that way, then we should build in that way. Not rezone it because a builder comes in and says they want to build a high density thing on that piece of property. I just think some of those things we jumped on too quickly because it looks and smells like the other neighborhoods around it, rather than looking at the comprehensive plan more diligently, more thoroughly, and then being a little bit more diligent about what those definitions are and what the intended long-term use of that would be. I agree with you. We're looking 20, 30 years down the road. If we build a piece right now and we build it and it gets done in a year, it's not going to be something different in 10 years. It's going to be just like it looks like when it gets built. And if it's not consistent, then we're not doing the right thing by the comprehensive plan. But that's my comment.
So Chair Cooper, I think we're headed in this way anyway, but I just want to put down a marker. I understand the desire to use examples, and that's fair. I want to make sure we stay in this conversation at the conceptual level and not dive too far into any particular application, especially one that's still active. So, examples understood, but let's try to not go too far.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioners?
to add
Or-
add my 2 cents, I guess, on the question of definition of mixed use centers and corridors. I think that's a very valid question. And when you're looking at a proposal, and that's the designation, the challenge we face with that particular future land use is there is no zoning that corresponds with it in our development code today. Someone, for the most part, could not develop consistent with that vision. That's one of the big reasons we're doing the code update. But we're kind of between a rock and a hard place of this is the vision, it should be consistent with that, and yet there's no zoning to implement it. So it's kind of a dilemma of what's the closest zoning that is consistent with that vision, as what's the closest we can get with the zoning we have today.
Any other comments from you?
Mr. Chair, Commission members, I've enjoyed the discussion. I appreciate the different viewpoints. When we offer you our professional recommendation, that is what it is, a recommendation. You can come to your own conclusions. That does not hurt our feelings, that we expect you to make your reasonable judgments. And just like the Board of Trustees does not have to follow your recommendation, they may go a different route. And again, I hope your feelings don't get hurt. This is just how land use works. It has to go through this process. It's hopefully a public process. That's the whole intent. So again, I appreciate the discussion, the different viewpoints. I hope we can have these kind of discussions in the future.
Yes, I think we should, and I appreciate your input, and from all the other staff that are here, it's been very helpful, I think, just to be able to have this discussion. So appreciate that.
So depending on these things, I don't know where we divide things between study sessions where we can have broader discussion without all the, right at the end of that thing, we're going to make a decision on some of these bigger issues. What kind of defines when we go to study session versus when it gets presented? Some of these things that get presented to us are very pro forma. They're not a lot of controversy to them. They're very cut and dried. Others are not. So how does the commission, if I read something and I say, I don't feel like I can make a decision in the week I get to review what you all provide, and there's need to ask more questions, how do we potentially move that to study session as opposed to right to a hearing?
So Commissioner Arterburn, maybe I can start with that one. Once there's an application in play and it's moving through the process as defined by the development code, there's not really an opportunity to pause it and say, okay, let's have a fact-finding conversation. It moves to a hearing. It moves toward you all. And I think maybe the most helpful way to think about it is that we have staff that are pulling facts and information together and the applicant that are pulling facts and information together. And they are trying to demonstrate, the applicant is trying to demonstrate that the review criteria are met. Staff is giving their take on whether the review criteria have been shown to be met. And you all are sitting back as it's a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning you all are quasi-judges. You're not You're fact finders in the sense that you let information come to you and you determine whether it's been proven. You get to make that determination. But the commission isn't commissioning studies, isn't delving into, here's all the information we need, come back to us. That can lead to round after round of trying to bring more information back to the commission, and it can hold up a decision, either a decision to approve or a decision to deny. So the code does allow for continuances in order to bring back more information. That is sort of a release valve that you all have. If there's something you really need to know, you can continue an item for more information, but that can lead to continuance after continuance after continuance to say, I'm still not quite there yet. And in my view, that's not really the role of the Planning Commission. It's really to say, okay, based on the information that we do have, do we think the review criteria have been shown to be met?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Arterburn, to Town Attorney Kramer's take, he always speaks very eloquently and says it's spot on better than I can. In the past, what I have seen done is you will make a recommendation. And Commissioner Arterburn, just to pick on you, for example, during your deliberation, you may say, I do not think these criteria are met. I'm going to vote denial. And in my past, I've seen applicants say, what information am I missing? I would support a continuance. So they're voluntarily requesting it because they think that if I provide X, Y, Z to the commission, they may be more supportive. Again, I don't encourage that. I do agree, Town Attorney Kramer, your role hopefully is you have the information before you, pass it on, yes or no. But sometimes an applicant may request a continuance from you. What are you missing? What am I not providing? Can I give you more information? So that is always an option that could come up before you.
Appreciate that comment. Where are we at in our agenda here? So there's no, we are not required to make any formal decisions about this is just discussion.
Correct, Mr. Chair. Once the discussion is complete in your determination, we can move on to the next item.
Okay, I'm not hearing any other questions or comments, so I think we're complete. And I appreciate all the input from everybody that's been here, so, all right?
I was going to make one comment. And we're referring to the document that you sent to us, correct? Because I really appreciated it. Comments like generally supporting rezoning were deemed to be generally supporting, being the Colorado courts generally support rezoning when deemed in conformance with such comprehensive plans. Those are the kind of things that are really important for us to understand, because that means that something has been challenged in the past, and it has gone to litigation, and the courts have favored that. So I really did appreciate the information that you sent and gave me a better understanding, and I thought you addressed spot zoning very well too. So I just wanted to comment on that. I don't know if that's what we're moving into, but I really appreciate, and I've appreciated all the stuff that I've gotten from the staff as far as being complete.
Let's move on. What? Other discussion items? Do we have anything else any updates from your department?
Mr. Chair, the only other item we were going to discuss, we kind of touched on it before, was the update on the development code update. The board did approve our contract. We are moving forward with design workshop. They were the consulting firm that we felt best met our scope, what we were looking for. So we're going to kick off this project next month, early February. So be on the lookout for that. I know Commissioner Mulhern was at the hearing, so he got to meet the consultant firsthand. So hopefully you'll all have that opportunity as well.
Okay.
Well, let me say that if anyone has not read the Estes Park Development Code update proposal from this organization, it is excellent. They do a very good job of explaining. I would hate to have to compete against them, you know, because they had some really good. I really appreciated that and got more excited, and that was one of the reasons I came out and listened to make sure it went through. And I was happy to be able to meet one of the project manager, I think it was.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thanks.
Rough timeline again is in the 12 to 24-month time frame. Is that about correct?
Mr. Chair, probably all of 26, or all of 25, most of 26.
Okay. Discussion reports. Do we have any other reports to discuss? Hearing none. Anything else on our agenda? All right. I move that, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, we don't actually need a motion to adjourn. If we're done, we just adjourn.
We adjourned.